And I feel like grief is a friend. You're going to stop and you're going to spend time with a friend, right? I'm going to stop for grief. I've learned, and my parents were great teachers of how to grieve well. So I'm very thankful for that because there was so much grief in my life, so much loss in my life before I was 18 years old. And my parents really were great examples of how to grieve and incorporate grief in moving forward. But also, it just didn't end. There were moments down the road that I would see my mom crying after her father passed. I mean, years later, and I understood because I felt that, and so it was giving permission to me too that you can still feel that even though we're years down the road. So I loved that, and I believe that we go through the experiences in life that we do to walk into our callings.
Maro, maro, nandena hai. Maro, maro, nandena hai.
Marcia, welcome to Cura Medicina. So happy to have you here.
So happy to be here and
Oh,
enjoying
beautiful.
getting to know you before we got on here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
beautiful. I appreciate that little nugget of unveiling that we
Mm,
did in such a
yes.
short time. Yeah, would you like to introduce yourself to the guests or to the audience and just say a
Sure.
little bit about who you are and how you got here and all that good stuff?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a child of God. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I'm a daughter, even though my parents are deceased, a sister, and a friend. And I'm a life, grief, trauma, brain, mental health coach, heart sync minister, mediator, author, and speaker, and a lover of life and people and being a part of their stories.
Yoo-hoo! That was a great description. I love that. Yeah, let's unravel that a little bit. There's a lot in there.
Yes.
Maybe start wherever you wanna start. Yeah.
Um, well, we were just kind of talking before we popped on here grief. Grief is part, I think, of everyone's life. And if they say it isn't, it's because they haven't really introspectively looked at their life and evaluated losses, because losses entitle far more than just the loss of a person. It can be loss of dreams, loss of
Mm,
an unmet expectation in our life, loss of relationship, friendships, and other situations, health, finances, and just not being included. I think not being included with people is a loss. I was bullied most of my life, but that bullying really made me be bold. It was the tool that I am so thankful that really made me be the person I am today. I believe it's just made me be courageous. My mother always said when people were making fun of me, well, God made only one you and no one else can be you. And so be you in every aspect of who you are. And that just resonated with me. So I was so thankful for that because she was validating and affirming who I am and the validation of who I already was before she received me. And that just gave me the courage and the boldness to step into me.
mm. I feel like that's a journey that we're all on, right? This, reclaiming it's such an interesting, mm, dichotomy between because when we're not being us, that's actually part of us too, right? So there's the authentic expression of who we are, but the masks that we wear are also masks that we've collected along the way somewhere, um, probably as a response to some trauma that we
Mhm.
carry. Right? So it's I've always been really, fascinated by this subject of, like, be yourself, be authentic, be who you really are. And yet, at the same time, when we're not being us, when we're being, little or putting ourselves down or not expressing what we feel, that's also us, right? That's like, so how do you decipher between, like, the authentic expression of who we are versus the learned behaviors that maybe we've been given by our parents or by our culture? Yeah, how do you think about that?
So for me, it goes back to the roots of who I was before being born by who God said I am. And therefore, I know who I am. And I think that's why we have such an identity crisis right now today. People don't know who they are. I know that I am loved. I know I'm valued. I know that, He breathed life and purpose over me. I know I'm a child of God. I know that I have an inheritance. I am clothed in His righteousness. There are those things. I really live that out in my life. And as a child, it was really taking on that identity that that was true, that um, I wasn't someone that needed that, was not being included. I already was included with the one who created me. I think it's a mind perspective of how
Mm,
we look at things, Derek. I think that lies can come in our life and start defining us and manipulating our actions where we kind of shrink back maybe because we feel like we can't be that person. And I am very blessed to have had the mom I did because I really always loved fashion. I love to wear different things. And this is when Levi's were the big thing and, Lacoste. And I just thought that was an ugly look for girls. I'm sorry. That was just not my jam. And so I would want to have all these. And my mom said, well, express yourself in that way. That's how God created you. And so she really continued to speak in the identity of who I was created to be, which I'm very blessed I had that. So throughout my years, I was emboldened through that perpetual truth ongoing. Therefore, you get what you get with me. You see what you see and you get what you get.
mm,
I'm not a mask wearer. I am exactly what you see, and if I have a problem, I'm gonna tell you. If I'm upset, we're gonna have a discussion. It's just the reality because this life is short, and I'm not here to play games. And I think
mm,
the difference you were asking, where does that well, I grief's been part of my life since I was 3 and a half. And so that right there changed life for me. I saw the brevity of life because I'm staring at my great grandmother's dead body and I cannot commune with her. And I had all these questions. And in that process, I realized people are going to die. And I mean, we don't know when they're going to die. And so it changed. It really was, that was a defining aspect, not the grief, but that was a defining aspect for me that, hey, life is short and so even from early on, and that's really a good part of why I was ostracized, I wasn't this silly little girl. I really understood the seriousness of life. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed being a little girl. I enjoyed my childhood. And but I really understood the aspect that there's life and death. And so I loved very deeply and I held on to the memories and the moments that I was with people and I was all in. And I'm still that way today. I've raised my children that way. I don't have my phone. If my kids are talking to me, I'm not on the phone. When we have dinner, I mean, I have adult kids, we still have dinner every night. I mean, it's just we're present for one another. Everything's on the table as far as conversations. There's never been an off the table conversation. It doesn't need to be. That was how it was in my house. Now, my dad was not on the table in the sense of wanting to hear some of the conversations. So he would get up
mm,
and leave because it was too much for him. But what I learned is that he had some unhealthy aspects that he wasn't willing to work through to be a part of those conversations, but that wasn't my problem.
beautiful. You said, some really interesting things in that. I mean, one is that, you were very connected to death, it sounds like, in that moment with your grandmother and
Great grandmother,
great-grandmother, wow.
great grandma, yeah.
And I feel like we live in a society where people pretend that death doesn't even exist.
Mhm.
Like, they don't talk about it, they don't think about it, they turn away from it, And though grief isn't always associated with death, as you said in the beginning, it can be associated with many things. I feel like there's something in that relationship of, not acknowledging death, not acknowledging our own death. We're all gonna die, right? So, like
Absolutely.
like sitting with the reality of that about ourselves, and then grief is in there too, but, yeah, I just could you say a little bit more about the, the recognition and the really acknowledgement of death, and how that maybe is also linked to grief?
So I think when we experience a death, and we've experienced the death of two of our oldest sons,
Mm,
that we have to recognize the person we were with that individual in that situation died. And we have to give ourselves permission to say that person's dead. And I'm not trying to go back to the version of who I was. I can't, nor do I want to, because neither one of those sons are here. I don't want to go back to the version of who I was when my mom and my dad lived because they're not here. I think we have to recognize that in death, that is also a place where I can incorporate those losses, and it's an exchange where I'm not gonna be able to go back to that, but I'm also receiving the newness of what's to come. There's an
mm.
exchange. I feel grief brings in so many teaching lessons for us, but I believe it's an exchange that we release over that which was, and we receive that which now can be. And for people who want to hold on, that's where grief becomes within the body, and the body keeps the score, and the body's going to have all that toxic, poisonous aspect building up, and they're not able to receive because they haven't dealt with the reality and they haven't had the releasing. And so we need to understand the linking of death. That's okay. This season has died. And we can grieve that season. I even grieve seasons. There's seasons of my life that I've grieved because it was just like, wow, that was a real unbelievable season. And even as my kids grew up, I just would sit before the Lord and grieve from one season to the next. First of all, the beauty of the season we had had and the struggles we had had, but that which we were entering into to receive it, but I had to grieve what was so I could go in the next season. And I feel
I
like
love that.
I feel a lot of times we just keep pushing ourselves through and we don't stop. And I feel like grief is a friend. You're going to stop
Mm,
and you're going to spend time with a friend, right? Well, I'm
mm.
gonna stop for grief. I've learned, and my parents were great teachers of how to grieve well. So I'm very thankful for that because there was so much grief in my life, so much loss in my life before I was 18 years old. And my parents really were great examples of how to grieve and incorporate grief in moving forward. But also, it just didn't end. There were moments down the road that I would see my mom crying after her father passed. I mean, years later, and I understood because I felt and so it was giving permission to me too that you can still feel that even though we're years down the road. So I loved that, and I believe that we go through the experiences in life that we do to walk into our callings in life.
So beautiful. I never thought about death as a season, and, um, as we move through the grief, on the other side of that, there's actually a new season because that person's no longer here, so who we were with that person in our lives or with that person alive
Mhm.
is no longer. And so the new relationship to that next season is is a renewal in a way. it's a loss, but it's also
Mhm.
a renewal. I never thought about death like that. I thank you so much for bringing that in, and it makes such sense, right? Is that when we lose something, most of us are focused on the grieving part, but not the renewal part, not the
Right.
new, like, not like the next step, right? So thank you for bringing that in. That was really, really powerful for me. And I was also thinking as you were speaking, you had great models, it sounds like, for grief. And God bless God bless you for that. Unlike my life, I did not have models for grief. I had very few models for anything, actually.
Mm.
So, what recommendation would you give for people out there who didn't have models of grief? I mean, that's why we're speaking, because
Right.
people like you can help. What are some things that are first steps for those people that don't have the tools to deal with grief in their life?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that people have to be intentional to get those tools even before they enter that season. I mean, to me, I'm all about tools. I like to be equipped. And so if I can be, I want to be. And so what I want to say to the listeners is that you're going to continually live with grief in your life. And so, how much better equipped if you have the tools and you start recognizing, I do need tools. And there are some great tools for me in knowing how to and learning and listening to this podcast is one of them. And knowing how to look at grief, knowing how to look at death, giving yourself permission to say, I'm not going to be that person anymore. And you know what? I don't wanna be that person. That person that passed or that situation is gone. I can't go back to that. And I'll never be that person I was with either of my sons because 'cause they're not here. So that component of me is missing, but it has been, in my opinion, and when I say missing, it's not missing that I'm looking for it. It's all been incorporated and that has passed, but now there is this new. And so I hope that people make it a purpose for them to seek out and gain the information and start looking in their own lives. And I think honestly, Derek, wouldn't you say that introspectively we all have to look and say, what losses have I actually had that I haven't grieved that right now would be good for me to start doing and implementing those things?
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing that I wanted to throw in there is, for the person who's died, if we don't go through that process of grief and renewal, it's actually, it can be detrimental to the spirit of that person. Because if there's a connection in a relationship that hasn't been healed between ourselves and the spirit of that person, they can get stuck, right? They can get stuck in between. So I think,
Well, now
thinking it
I don't personally believe that. I
you
believe that
don't.
I don't. I believe that when someone passes, that's it. But we're the ones living that are left with what we need. We have a room in the Sterling Rose Sanctuary and a tool called the Rose and Thorn Room. And so what that is to unpack the thorns that we may have here
Mm,
that was within that relationship that was unresolved and to bring resolution to it so that we can appreciate each petal on the rose and to also be able to embrace the sweet aroma of that rose, which without unpacking that thorn, we can't appreciate the rose or the sweet aroma. But we're left to resolve that. I don't believe the spirit is hung up with us
mm.
because they're gone. They're free and clear. But we are left to bring resolve to ourselves as to what we have endured, the thoughts. And I think in grief that it exposes right and wrong theology. And we have to be acknowledging that as we walk through because there were some some wrong theology that people were trying to speak over situations in my son's passings, and the Spirit, the Holy Spirit in me said, "That's not true. This is what I've said." And so it realigned my mind and my spirit and my soul. Because see, our soul is what gets weighty. The
Mm.
soul is what is really having a hard time with the loss. Our spirit, if it is strengthened, and for me, knowing the word of God, it can speak to my soul and it breathes that life back into it, where now I can move forward and I can keep on this journey. But if I'm just allowing for my soul to be having all this stuff tapped into it and I'm not dealing with it, then that's where the weight and the anxiety and the depression starts building, and my body starts not being able to do the things it was created to do because now it's not feeling well and it's bothering me. And so now I've got so many issues that I'm having to attend to. So I feel like we have four components: the mind, body, soul, and the spirit. And they're four separate aspects. But when we work in the Stolen Road Sanctuary, we're working to heal all four because I feel if you do one without the others, you're doing a disservice.
Of course, holistic healing is where it's at.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I believe you mentioned the breath work in the beginning of the session. I'd love to know how you incorporate breath work in this whole process.
So most of our grievers, okay, first of all, our slogan is breathe again, move again, live again. Why? Because when grieving, we start breathing very shallow. Our body's not receiving the oxygen that it needs to. So we're also always very mindful with our grievers. Hey, could we just implement some breath work? And we do the 5, 6, 7 rule: inhale for 5, hold for 6, and release for 7. But ours is that we want you to inhale, and whether you're a believer, non-believer, for the believer, inhale the breath of Christ, and in releasing that you're exhaling both sides, you're exhaling all the toxins and you're exhaling the negative thinking, the lies, whatever is going on, you're releasing that and you're visually seeing that, and if you need to speak it out. And so some people need to speak it out and they do. But we ask them to do that for at least 10 different times and to really be able to and really to lay down in a posture where they can really visualize the breath coming in, filling their lungs or filling their diaphragm, filling their diaphragm up. And we want them to breathe starting with their diaphragm, where it then goes up to their chest. Because if you start right, you can start in the diaphragm and then keep breathing where it fills up the entire capacity of your chest, and then holding it and then releasing. So you're clearing out. I love clearing out. It's like housekeeping. You're clearing out all of the negativity and the toxins that are in there in order to now breathe in the fresh breath, the newness. And so we find that important. And I find somatic exercises is great for releasing the grief and the trauma that people have experienced. So even though I'm not with people to be able to do that with them, we encourage it, and we hope in the Sterling Rose Sanctuary we can have a room where they can come in and actually do it.
Beautiful. And do you use breath work, this is in the beginning or also
We
during yeah,
throughout, because first of all,
true.
grief is a long process for some people, and again, and when I say long, it could be, you know, 3 months, it could be a year. But what we want is for people to have really good habits instilled in this grief process. That, and I still get up every morning and I do my breath work. I before I get out of bed, I wake up and I just do my brain, because it's just something that honestly I started doing after the loss of my first son, because I could not get my breath. And I just said, Jesus, I have no breath. And he said, I'm going to breathe into you. And he did. And he breathes into me this day. But Derek, I just felt dead. And I just
Mm.
felt so breathless and just, and I needed his breath, and so he really was my sustainer to give me breath to keep going. Because in the loss of my son, I felt I had been I mean, all my skin had been taken off of my body, and I was just this raw flesh and just aching and exposed and just oh my goodness. I mean, I felt I had been amputated in so many ways of my life, and so therefore, I realized I wasn't breathing properly. And so because of my training, I was like, "Oh, Lord, I am," and he said, I'm gonna tell you how to breathe." And he started, really working with me and said, "I just need for you to sit here and breathe in and hold it and then release." And there actually is a technique. Later, I found there is a technique, and there are more techniques which other we can go into as well. But I mean, there are other techniques that people can do, and it's just so important for the revitalization of our bodies and our mind so that we can have clarity. Because, see, I think what happens when we lose that breath, we also lose clarity. We hear a lot about the fog, the brain fog in grief. Well, guess what? You're not getting oxygen. Of course, you have brain fog.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, the breath is so important, so important.
it is.
So if someone listening to this wanted to, come work with you in the process of their grief, can you just walk us through what that looks like and, you know, give us a little sampling of you know, what they'll experience essentially?
Sure. They can reach out on our website, www.thesterlingrosesanctuary.us. Why US? Because it takes us as a community to really bring healing back to other people. And we have missed this us component. So we're very intentional in everything we do. But they can go online, they can fill out a form. And when you come to work with us, really, we start out with just a conversation. What are your expectations? What do you want to really be able to achieve through this? I am a coach, so my job is to cheer you on and to provide those tools in the process. So I want to know what it is that you're wanting and the end result. And so we have something called heart healing in our ministry. And we actually work on the four parts: the heart, which is true self function, guardian, and emotion. And when we're talking about emotion, we're talking about all the negative emotions that start getting in the way, that really can bring on depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation and separation and all of those things. So we really want to deal with those negative emotions: shame, guilt, anger, unforgiveness, all the things that sorrow, all the things that are there. Because what we want is for you to be able to return to joy immediately with the Lord, or return to joy if you're not a believer. We want you to have the ability to return to joy. And yes, we can all return to joy. But again, it's the intentionality. So we work with those parts, and then we give those parts the ability to go in and release and then receive. This is the exchange, the
Mm.
releasing, the receiving, and then they then have the ability to walk in their new created design, because they were never meant to walk around with unforgiveness and this spirit of unforgiveness all throughout their life. They really were meant to have an abundant life. And so each of the parts get very excited when they hear that they really were infused to have life and not this overshadowing of death. And so we work with that. I give homework sometimes to my clients. But good homework, because I am wanting for you to have the most success. And the homework I'm giving you is for the betterment of your body, mind, soul, and spirit. So we have a lot of components that we include with that. We help you as a griever kind of know the boundaries that you need to put in place to protect yourself in this season of life so that you're not trying to be taken advantage of. So there's a number of things, but we have great success. And I just want people to know it is such an honor to walk beside them and be with them.
Can you talk a little bit more? I'm interested in myself, like what things you do to unravel the grief, if you can, a little bit, or to, just hold it or however you talk about it?
There's two sides of that. We can
Yeah.
discuss and we can actually unravel the trauma. based on the parts that reveal themselves. So let's say you have a part that feels rejected. We can start, I can start talking to rejection itself. We can go in and see where rejection came in from, the source. And then we want to bring that in and say, so what would it be like if you knew you were accepted?
Hmm.
And we allow for that part to be in a place where it is accepted and received. And then that part is able to, it's in the exchange again. I'm no longer going to walk in rejection. I'm going to walk in the acceptance and in the love that comes in this place. Because quite often, those parts, shame, guilt, unforgiveness, rejection, abandonment, they foster lies within us that majority of the stuff is not true. But it actually also prevents us from having relationships that are healthy, and it's very toxic for us. So we unpack all of that, and then we allow for that part to choose whether they want to have healing or not. See, every part has its own free will. So I don't just go in and force any part, but I've not had a part that's not wanted to have healing. And we do a lot of that in the heart healing, Derek, where that trauma is unpacked in the heart healing. I work a lot with sexual ritual abuse individuals, and it is amazing. It is such holy ground to watch the healing that happens to all people. But in the sexual ritual abuse arena, there are so many fractured parts, and to see each one of them being able to receive new life is absolutely beyond what I can even describe. So it is a very intimate time when people are with me, and it's a very honoring time to the individual, their parts. I love to affirm their parts and thank their parts for getting the person where they are. Even though now those parts are causing some distractions and maybe some complications, and that's what we talk about. Did you know you could do life differently? No, and they don't. Because it's what they've learned to operate from that system, because that was the embeddedness that came from that trauma moment. And for people who have had trauma and then they didn't deal with their trauma or their grief, what happens if they have another trauma or grief, then it becomes complicated and complex. And so they're layers, and we just peel back the layers one at a time as they're ready. And they do come forward. Parts love to talk, they love to share. They really do. They like to tell their story.
Great. Do you think that grief is, something that accumulates in in a part of the body, or do you think that grief is associated with an event? And so you might have a grief from a death, and then another grief from, loss. How do you think about grief as a living entity in the body?
Oh, you have both right there. I mean, you just described 2 sides of that. First of all, we can either grieve with hope or have a spirit of grief that comes and resides in us. When a spirit of grief comes and resides in us, that's toxic. That's when we start having physical problems. We can have emotional, mental problems. So it's 95% of the people that are looking and are seeking out counselors and coaches, it's due to unresolved grief. That means those people have lived with things for not one, but multiple seasons of their life. So when you're talking about that, grief can pile up because we go back to the beginning. If we're not intentionally dealing with each loss, that produces grief, then it starts stacking up. And then all of a sudden, we will have an implosion because we can only, in our capacity, have so much. Does that make sense?
Totally, totally. And are there any practices that you recommend once we've moved to the new, like through the grief into the new season, if you will?
Well, so this is what I want to say. I really encourage all my clients to keep a gratitude journal, thankful gratitude journal. I encourage them to do that ongoing. And even if they don't write it down, every day when you get up, start with gratitude. Stop throughout the day and speak gratitude of the things that you have. Because part of the process of grieving is rewiring our brain so that we can walk in that joy, walk in the life abundantly that we have. And I encourage them to get outside, Derek, because most people, when they're grieving, they get in a habit of changing the way they do life, and they can become immobile and they stay inside or they become isolated away from other people. Get outside in nature. Nature reconnects us with the Creator Himself. We get to experience life around us. Therefore, we feel alive. That is something that needs to be continuing. It doesn't stop. So we really try to impartate good uh, good options and habits for people to incorporate in their life. Clean eating, we really encourage continue to clean eat, and that means no sugars, no carbs. I know people are gasping. Yes, no sugar, no carbs, because your body really was made to have the sustaining aspect with vegetables and fruits and to have, the meats, but again, certain meats, fish, that kind of stuff. And so we want people to eat healthily and they have to know why they wanna live. We actually walk with our clients, "Let's write, why do you wanna live? Why do you wanna live?" And they may not want to live. Well, let's ask, "What if you did wanna live? What would you wanna do?" So in that, we want to encourage them to continue to walk towards the goals that they have in their life, in healthy ways. We encourage them to align themselves with a right community because, Derek, I know you know as well as I do, if we don't have the right community, it can tank very quickly. And it may be a season that when you go through grief, I think that grief also, whatever that season of grief is, there's a giving up of friendships and a receiving of new ones. Because some friends were never meant to walk that season and that journey with us. And again, we shouldn't take and personalize it. We need to be okay and know that that's part of the exchange. So, and to walk with that, not looking back, not wanting what was, but receiving all that is in the future. And to work out, whether it's walking or whether it's going to the gym or swimming, go work out, you know, build your body, do things healthily, and to also do something to engage their mind because we want their mind too to be refreshed, to be renewed. So I think there's so many things moving forward that we need to have already started implementing in the process of our grief journey that is just a continuum.
I love that. Those are great recommendations. Thank you so much. This has been a beautiful podcast and has got me thinking about my grief again, which is good. Which is good. Do you have any other I mean, I'll drop the link to the website in the show notes so people can contact you directly, but did you have any other, departing comments or recommendations for listeners?
Oh, I just want the listeners to know that grief can feel very lonely. Now, for me, because I have this deep abiding relationship with Jesus, I was never alone, but that doesn't mean I didn't feel lonely because grief is a lonely journey, and each of us have to walk our journey. And the losses that you've had, the losses that I've had, Loss is loss, but I haven't walked in your shoes. You haven't walked in my shoes. We can have compassion and we can have capacity for one another. And I want to encourage listeners to learn how to have capacity to be present in the space for people that are grieving, not with your own expectations of what that grief should look like, but giving permission for them to be able to grieve through their story. And that in the midst of that, that only builds a more resilient love and friendship, and we need community when we're doing this. But I want people to know that if they're feeling lonely, they can reach out to us because I would love to be with them. I'd love to walk with them, and I'll stay the course with them because that's what I want to do. And I want them to know they've got somebody with them in their court who is going to walk them in and through and on the other side.
Awesome. We all need a helping hand,
Yes, we do.
and you definitely have the skills and the capacity in this field, I can tell. And thank you so much for all your work and for doing what you do and helping people through their process. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having
Yeah.
this podcast and for having such a heart for those that are grieving and that really need to have the tools because you've walked your own journey and you understand the necessity. And so, thank you, Derek. I love that. And I love your heart.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate the people who tune in to these subjects in this podcast. I created it to share part of my world, and I just want you to know I have much gratitude. I would love it if you followed and subscribed to the podcast so that you could receive all the beauty that's coming your way. Take a moment and please leave a quick review. It would really help the podcast spread and would also let me connect with the people that are listening. I would love to build this community in a very mindful way. And by leaving a review, you help me understand who you are and if you like it. Wishing you a wonderful day. And I look forward to our next podcast together. Hausch, hausch.